Hey there, guys. Editing Dawn here. Um, just for a bit of context, I recorded almost all of the audio for this video not too long after I watched Chapter 7, and I recorded it with the intention of posting this video at least like the week after Chapter 7 went live for everyone, not just Rooster Teeth First members. And so this is kind of my fresh take right then and there. Um, However, RWBY is one of those shows that I enjoy quite a bit on a first watching experience, but kind of sort of falls apart for me after I think about it too hard. So I'm I say all that to say is that I'm extremely charitable to the show so far within this video, and my opinions have since changed a bit. I feel a little less charitable about it now. I still enjoy it quite a bit. It's still a net, it was watching it was still a net positive experience for me. But there's quite a few critiques that I could have gone into here that I just chose not to do so because, I was just having fun with the show. And I I just wanted to warn you guys because I've already decided that I'm probably going to do a full season kind of review at the end after all of the chapters, after the second half has aired as well. And just so you're not surprised when I come back to some of the things I said in this video and I'm suddenly a bit harsher about it. Like I've scrutinized a bit more of the show's choices in this season so far, and I have come to the conclusion that that more of it doesn't work for me than I initially thought. But that's not to say it's bad. It's not to say it's bad at all. It's just different. We'll go with that. It's just different. I think a bit differently of it now. Still think it's a net positive. Just stay tuned for, I don't know, the next one. Anyways, that's it. That's all. Okie doke. So, RWBY Volume 8, Chapter 7 has gone live for all to see, which means that at the time of this recording, the show's about to go on a holiday hiatus for 5 weeks? 6 weeks? There's a hiatus, which is all that's really relevant. And somehow, some way, RWBY has managed to be the only anime/show that I've regularly kept up with over the past few months, so, I have some thoughts. And I'm going to talk about them. A disclaimer before we begin. Broadly speaking, I've really enjoyed the volume so far. It's not without hang-ups, but nothing I've had a problem with so far has affected my ability to enjoy watching it. I say this because I understand that there's a bit of a culture to RWBY's fandom to tear the show to shreds at any opportunity. Things like harp on every detail, blow up every minor mistake into an exhaustive dissertation on the team's incompetence, start watching angry and finish watching angrier. No offense to you if that's your jam, though. Everyone enjoys media in different ways, but if that's what you're expecting me to do, then, well, I'm not going to do that, so take from that what you will. That's not to say that I don't have critiques, because I do. It's just that my overall experience with Volume 8 has been a good one so far, so my praises pretty heavily outweigh my complaints. So if that sounds like a good time to you, then stick around. First thing I have to get out of the way is complimenting the team on finally putting out episodes of a relatively consistent length, and for the fact that the length is pretty serviceable to everything that they're doing. It really seems like they're managing their resources a bit better this time around because the episodes are well structured and well paced for the most part, and the content of the episodes has generally been engaging and supportive to the overall narrative being told. I'm going to get into some more blanket statements out of the way before I move on to specifics. The show looks great. The colors are popping, the lighting and scene composition are almost always enhancing whatever mood they're going for. There's a subtlety to the environment and the framing of the environments that feels really smart. Characters' facial expressions are lovely, which is something I can pretty confidently say that RWBY has down to a T by this point. The music score is passable, I guess. There's only been 2 moments in which the music has really stood out to me in a great way. I don't like the intro song, but know that that's a statement that comes from someone who has only ever liked Volume 5 and Volume 6's intro song. But I do like the intro's visuals, spoiler-tastic as they seem to be these past 4 volumes. The voice acting is top-notch so far, and I can look forward to things getting more intense from here on out and seeing how all of these elements are handled in the second half of the volume. Now, I'm going to proceed to go into more detail about what I did and didn't like from this volume so far. I was going to go episode by episode, but upon thinking it over a bit more, I came to the conclusion that I'd rather go by characters. So that's what I'm going to do in no particular order. If I don't mention any specific character or event, you can just assume that I found them/it unremarkable for the most part. So let's talk about it. I'm just gonna go with Ironwood first, because as brilliantly handled as he was last volume, I feel like they kinda dropped the ball with him here. Right from jump, it's pretty clear that we're meant to read Ironwood as a villain and too far gone to see reason. Which, fine, I guess. But instead of feeling like a well-intentioned extremist in the middle of a breakdown and still trying to power through his job even though it's grown past the point where he can reliably handle it on his own, like he was at the end of last volume, Ironwood immediately starts doing things that quite frankly feel a bit ridiculous and a little too on the nose. Letting his troops brutalize and or otherwise torture his prisoner is bad enough, but he goes full-on dictator mode and starts making decisions that seem specifically geared to make us not like him. All of this would be fine on its own, but I feel like we got here too fast. Ironwood's decision to trust Watts is absurd. His making Winter get back on her feet when she's supposedly still critically injured is gross. His treatment of Penny as just a weapon and his whole guilt trip dialogue is annoying. But what's more annoying is that there doesn't seem to be any natural progression to any of these things. I suppose you can argue that his finding out that Penny took the mating powers can be a trigger for his actions here, but it all feels a little too campy for my taste. This moment of him gunning down the councilman was appropriately uncomfortable to watch at first, but upon watching the rest of the volume and coming back to the first episode, I ultimately came to the conclusion that this felt a bit too unreasonable for Ironwood at this point in time. I personally think that it would have been worked better if he only decided to use Watts after the Aesops failed in an initial attempt to apprehend Penny. And I think that this scene of him shooting the guy would have been more effective and more sensible a bit further into the volume. Like, say, if Ironwood had managed to coerce or intimidate the council into going along with his martial law for the first few episodes, but only snapped and killed him when the guy came back again and asked more questions, perhaps after RWBY's broadcast. I don't know, I just feel like in that string of events, we would have had time to see Ironwood get more and more desperate and angry and hopeless. And then this moment would hit a bit more and a bit different. And then we also wouldn't be left wondering how Winter and the Aesops reconcile murder with just following their boss's orders. Like, seriously? Ironwood's always been shown to be at least respectful and approachable by his subordinates up until this point. So why are none of them more concerned about this? Any decent person with a functioning sense of logic will come to the conclusion that he's probably gone off the deep end. They have no reason to believe at this point in time that the council is going to somehow be able to ruin their military operation, especially considering that the council has always eventually signed it with Ironwood anyway in the past, so why do they all just accept this murder as necessary? But really, that's only if they wanted to continue having us see him as a well-intentioned guy who was just going too far out of fear and frustration, which seemed to be what they were going for last volume. As it is now, if they wanted to see him as a new villain, then all of this accomplishes that well enough. I'm just a little annoyed that they just made him seemingly lose all sense for these moments. Maybe they'll explain it away with this absolutely absurd semblance. I don't even know how to properly address Ironwood's apparent semblance, but as it is now, it's one of the weakest concepts of the show to date. I'm gonna need a lot more exploration into that before I can take it seriously. Please. I'm open to being wrong about thinking that this is stupid. Please change my mind. Anyway, that's it for him. He serves his purpose, I guess. He's just annoying to look at on screen. While we're here, let's go for Winter. We don't get much from her so far, but what we do get is smart and handled well. This is what I meant by confidence in RWBY's facial expressions, and also what I mean by framing and scene composition enhancing the show. Winter says nothing about what she's feeling aloud, but we can intuit everything from just looking at her, and it's great. I live for it. And I love that she put Harriet in her place. Speaking of Harriet, the Aesops are so unlikable, with the exception of Merrow, who is simultaneously the most interesting and the most sympathetic. These guys are also annoying to look at on screen. I just don't like them. I feel like we needed to spend a little more time with the Ops last volume, because here their characterizations are just kind of shallow for me. To the point where when Ren reveals what they're really feeling in Chapter 7, I don't care. I'm going to argue that the moment is meant more for Ren and Winter's characters than the actual individual Ops, but either way it doesn't hit with me. Merrill's cool though. I like him well enough, and it's looking more and more like he's gonna get that redemption arc I wanted him to get. Well, that or he's going to die. Potentially both. We'll see. The Happy Huntresses are charming and great, and I understand why the fandom has embraced them so tightly, but they're really just there. I don't know. May's wham line here about her family is brilliant, and gives us a lot, but beyond that moment, I can't actually empathize with everyone's excitement over them. I'm personally at the point with RWBY that unless a new character is outstandingly interesting in some way, I don't very much care to see them around all that often. It's good that they use them though, I guess, and the way that they've used them works well so far, so moving on. Okay. If you're a Robyn stan or supporter, I recommend maybe skipping this little bit on her, because while I don't have much to say about Robyn, the little I do have to say is not nice, nor is it productive, and I admit this wholeheartedly. I hate this woman. She's obnoxious and annoying, and she takes up unnecessary screen time, and it sucks because somehow, someway, the writers clearly want us to like her and think of her as a big deal, but she's not. She's an eyesore. Her design is bland, her personality is blech. And I hate that she's the only one really in Qrow's corner right now, because she's actually kind of an asshole. I just need the show to be done with her as soon as possible. That's it. Speaking of Qrow, he's okay this volume. I'm glad that he acknowledged aloud that Clover played a hand in his own demise by not focusing on the serial killer. Which, by the way, I think the crew should have leaned more into last volume. Like, there should have been at least one more moment in the fight where Clover unambiguously targeted Qrow over Tyrian before Qrow and Tyrian attacked together. You know, to sell this as anything other than the super contrived and absurdly unbelievable sequence of events that it actually is. Yeah. Anyways, good on Qrow for saying this, but I think that his words here are a bit too fluffy and on the nose. Like, deal with the darkness. I really think that would have been more effective if Qrow just said, hey, I can't believe I was so stupid / naive. Like, the way he says this just doesn't feel natural for him. Like, especially when he just insists on murdering Ironwood. Like, what the hell, Qrow? He's always been shown even-tempered dude up to this point. And he seems to have gotten over his hopeless binge upon learning the truth about Osmond. He's used to losing people he cares about, and not once has it been shown that Qrow is particularly violent or that he defaults to murder when he gets mad. So these moments of him insisting on killing Ironwood are just weird. Like, I could see Qrow using Clover's death to verbally assault and emotionally hurt Ironwood, and I could see Qrow ultimately accepting the idea that Ironwood might have to die if they were, like, fighting or something. But this premeditated crap is weird and awkward as hell to watch. Like, all of Qrow and Robyn's scenes this volume are awkward, uninspired, and annoying. So here's hoping that something better gets done with them next go-round. Watts is fine. I think him and Tyrian are actually the ones from Salem's camp that I'm the most interested to see more about. I don't care about this guy. Marie and Pietro are an absolute delight to see on screen this volume. Their chemistry is great, their dialogue hits where it needs to, and their voice actors are just bringing them to life so very well. Getting to see Maria fight Neo was quite literally one of the most satisfying moments in the show, and it makes sense. Maria was a top-tier huntress that inspired a whole generation of supremely competent fighters. Sure, she's old, but technology still allows her to see, and her semblance gives her at least as much maneuverability and intuitive movement as Neo. Likely more, even. I haven't gone deep diving into the fan reactions to this moment, so I haven't actually seen anyone call this tussle BS or be butthurt about it. But if you are, then you're honestly kind of reaching and likely making your own self mad. Give yourself a break. Please. Any scene with Pietro and Penny are easily some of the warmest and most lovable interactions in this volume. Maybe in the show, to be perfectly honest, because they feel natural and earned every time. Pietro's concern for Penny makes perfect sense, and I found it really easy to feel for him and his struggle of wanting to keep her safe while at the same time letting her live her life. It's one of my personal favorite things to see in a high fantasy action setting. Familial relationships and struggles with doing what needs to be done versus looking out for your own. And I find that not many shows have the parents of the protagonists be such active participants in the plot. It makes me wish we could get more of these types of interactions with Qrow, Yang, and RWBY, and it also makes me wish that Taeyang was a bit more active in this plot. But, who knows? Maybe he will be, after this volume. Here's hoping. Neo's fun. I like her around. No other comment, really. Emerald is an extremely consistent and competently written character. By this point, we pretty much know what we can expect from her, and almost all of our decisions and motivation makes sense. This unhealthy and self-destructive attachment she's got to Cinder has worked thus far and works pretty well towards us having some degree of sympathy for her. That being said, I'm quickly becoming tired of it. Emerald doesn't really have the presence to carry a scene for me, and honestly, she's kind of just there these past few volumes, and I haven't gotten anything out of it. When she uses her semblance, it brings an interesting element to the scenario she's present for, and I will admit that it worked towards raising the stakes in this fight between Cinder and Penny. And I find it very fascinating that she and Hazel are now the only ones from Salem's camp, Mercury too, I guess, but more on him later, that know the password to the lamp. I can't help but wonder how that's going to go. A part of me thinks that Emerald is going to get to it first and then ask the question, and either Hazel is going to walk in on it, or he'll be too late and then he'll try to ask a question and think that Oscar was lying to him because Emerald's already used it. But we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Speaking of Hazel, he's okay, I guess. I was legit scared for Oscar when Hazel came onto the scene here, and that's effective. I'm glad we got more insight into what Hazel's motivations are. I'd figured that there had to be more to it after he got all angry at Ozpin in Volume 5, because I didn't think it was possible for the writers, experienced or not, to actually put such a shallow motivation out there and expect us to not think that this guy is a fucking idiot. I assumed that there was more to it, or that Ozpin was lying to Oscar about the reason, and while I still think it would have done more service to the plot and Hazel's character if Ozpin was lying about his motivation, what we've got here works in a way too. With first-hand knowledge of the fact that Salem can't be killed, I can understand his anger at Ozpin for establishing the Huntsman Academies, because ultimately, in a way, he is sending children to either an early death or an adult life riddled with danger in order to fight against an enemy he's admitted that he doesn't know how to defeat. I can also visualize the hopelessness he must have felt that would lead him to think that joining Salem was the only thing left for him. I question why he would believe that she means anything good for the world, period, considering the fact that her creations literally destroy any life that they can get a hold of. But as you'll hear me speak more about later, Salem's motherly and manipulative demeanor might have something to do with that. So yeah, decent stuff from Hazel so far, but I'm still not feeling it for him, because even with all of that taken into account, I can't really get how he reconciles the context of his situation with torturing an innocent kid within an inch of his life. It'd make more sense to me if it was established that Salem forced Hazel to do this, but Qrow seems way too eager to hurt Oscar, even when he acknowledges that it's Oscar that he's hurting and Ozpin should be taking it. As though it's not the same kid's body or some shit. So, yeah, I can see him dying too, relatively soon, and I can't say that I would miss him as he is now. So, yeah. Mercury is a prime example of Rooster Teeth shoving too many fucking characters into this show. I want a lot more from this guy, to be perfectly honest. I'm trying to figure out how he's one of the few bad guys we have a backstory for now, and he's still hardly used at all. Especially considering his backstory is interesting as hell. Raised into the life of an assassin by an abusive father that took away his semblance and his legs only for him to kill his father before getting involved with Cinder. This is the type of thing I live to see exploration into. And if there's anyone on the bad guy's side that deserves a chance at redemption, it's him and Emerald, but especially him because he'd have to work much harder at it than Emerald, and it would just be so interesting. The fandom has better ideas and plans for Mercury than the writers themselves so far. One theory I like to look at when I was watching these episodes was the concept that Mercury would be deeply uncomfortable and likely triggered by the idea of Hazel beating on Oscar like he is, and then he'd help the kid out if he could. It was awesome to think about, but I certainly didn't believe that the writers would go that route. It would require a nuanced plan for Mercury's trauma that I don't quite think they have the time or range to really explore at this time, which may be for the best, because I think that the team needs a bit more work on telling a story about trauma. Maybe just a little bit. Anyways, he's off to Vacuo with Tyrian, so here's hoping that they'll utilize him more in the future. His design is kind of boring, but his fighting style is cool, his backstory is interesting, and has a lot of potential to hit some really emotional highs and lows. And he has one of the most decorated and impressive voice actors of the cast. Please utilize him more in the future, and please do it well. Please. I'm gonna save the biggest players in the volume so far for the later parts of the video, so let's talk about 3 of our main protagonists and Nora. Yay! 3 of our main protagonists and Nora. Nora has some very inspired and touching moments in the volume so far. I really liked seeing her on screen. It's lovely seeing her interact with other members of the group, even though I'm going to argue that she's never really had that much of a problem doing that before. But her dialogue here is more grounded and compelling, and I like to see the concern the other girls have for her. She really feels like their friend here. Her decision to go up to Atlas as opposed to helping the people down in Mantle is inconsistent and doesn't really hold up well under scrutiny, based on what we saw from her so far, but I'm letting that go because I think this division of teams has worked very well so far. I'm getting mild death flags from her, to be perfectly honest, and I don't know how I feel about that. At first I thought it might be Ren, if they were going to kill off someone from the core cast of characters, and while that's still certainly a possibility, I'm less inclined to believe that given what we've gotten from him so far, but more on that later. But I'm wondering if Nora might attempt to get up and fight before she's ready, and that might be what does her in. It would be heartbreaking, and it would hit the fandom like a freight train. But in an odd way, it would kind of make sense. I love to see Nora on screen, but I somehow feel like we've seen the pinnacle of her character so far. Unless they're going to split her and Ren up for like an entire volume, I don't really see where she goes from here that services the narrative in a meaningful way, other than keeping her as comic relief and one half of the most established couple of the group. That's not to say that I want Nora to die. I don't, not by a long shot. But if Rooster Teeth wants this to be a situation that raises the stakes and ravages the fandom's emotions and makes the villains seem untouchable, which seems to be what they're going for this volume, then I would personally kill off one of the villains if they tried to defect from Salem. Hazel, likely. I'd also have the protagonists be put in a situation where they're forced to see Ironwood or Winter die. And I'd kill off one of Jaune, Ren, or Nora. As we have it so far, Ren feels like the only one that's safe from that, but once again, more on that later. Blake's okay. She's honestly my least favorite of the main 4 girls, but I've enjoyed her so far. Sure, most of her dialogue is just her being snarky and lighthearted, but it works for her. Blake being a dork when she feels relaxed enough makes sense, and it feels nice to see on screen. I like it when her and RWBY interact, and she's been a bit of a grounding presence to this group so far. Keeps the tone from getting too dark on us. I've heard some people complain about the shifting tones of this volume, and while it can be jarring just based on some episode composition and editing choices, in the end it's really not that bad. I'm going to argue that this is another thing that people are just letting themselves get mad over, because this is not new for RWBY. They have this sort of lightheartedness and humor just thrown in randomly when the characters feel confident or comfortable about their situation. And given the fact that all of these kids signed up for a life of fighting nightmare fuel monsters that are attracted to negative emotions, and all of them do have some degree of knowledge of how dark that can make this world by this point in time, I'm going to argue that some joking around when they're sneaking around a military base with someone who can make them all invisible, and someone who can transport them all at high speed, and someone who can hack them into wherever they need to go, well, they can joke around a bit, guys. It's fine. Anyways, I digress. RWBY's been pretty unremarkable so far, but I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing. I said that I wanted her to be Nora and Penny's biggest supporter in this volume, and I got that. Her speech to Remnant was cool. I have no complaints about it. I'm glad that it's been acknowledged in universe that she may be a bit in over her head with trying to lead this group, and I hope that they continue on with this little thread. RWBY's so far been portrayed as pretty flawless in her ability to lead the group, and always right, even when her plans don't pan out as expected, and that's both boring and annoying to watch. I want to see her actually struggle and pull a victory off by the skin of her teeth. But I don't want it to be a clean win. I want it to be jagged, and I want it to hurt, because I want to see her learn from it and grow and improve to become a character that I want to root for. Here's hoping, I guess. Weiss is my favorite of the main four. Ever since Volume 3, I want to say, she's consistently been the most likable and compelling for me to see on screen out of Team RWBY. Back when she knew how to fight with her sword, actually, she also had my favorite fighting style to watch out of the entirety of the protagonists. Her story has been good so far, her progression has been believable and a joy to watch, and if she were to talk to Blake and address her former prejudice attitude better than whatever it is they called her doing in Volume 1, she would then have the best and most satisfying emotional connections with her teammates, matching Jaune with Ren, Nora, and Oscar to some extent. I just wish that they would have done more with her up to this point. Like, RWBY's team's momentum grinds to a halt very early on in this volume, and then we just see them lounging about and worrying. I wish that these moments were filled with Weiss interacting more with Whitley, because while this moment was nice and all, it doesn't nearly address all the baggage that the Sneege have. And that's a shame, because Whitley and her mother are both in here with them, and this would have been the perfect opportunity. I'm not too mad about it, though. I have a feeling that this group is about to be a lot more proactive in the coming chapters, and it could very well be that Rooster Teeth would have fumbled if they tried to cram more important stuff in these chapters with a time limit on them. And what we do have, I do actually like. I really enjoy the fact that Weiss has kind of grown into the mom friend. It feels like a satisfying and natural progression of her defrosting Ice Queen persona, and it makes sense given how openly she cares about her sister. One thing a friend and mutual watcher of the show proposed to me is the idea that Weiss may very well be emotionally and mentally overwhelmed with everything going on in her home, and that's why she's less proactive and kind of relegating herself to a supporting role. And it kind of tracks for me upon further thought. Weiss does seem to be going through a lot of subtle stress and emotions these past 2 volumes, and I wonder if she's on her way to a bit of a breakdown. Time will tell. Alrighty. Now on to those who are either carrying the plot or have some of the most noteworthy moments in the volume thus far. I really, really adore Penny this volume so far. It's come as a mild shock to me because I've never really embraced her as tightly as other fans of the show seem to have, but ever since her reintroduction, she's consistently been one of the most pleasant and compelling characters to watch on screen for me, and it follows with this volume as well. Her internal struggles with both her duty and her humanity are very well portrayed in her face and her voice, and she's one of those characters that instantaneously has an interesting dynamic with anyone she's put into a scene with. Half of the action in this volume so far comes with Penny, and it's awesome to look at. Seeing her pretty much overcome any learning curve with the maiden powers and clean house with them is so satisfying, and it's not even something that's all that surprising. Penny's brain is literally a supercomputer. It makes sense that she can deduce the best way to use her powers in tandem with everything she's already got going on. This moment where Watts is hacking her is so well animated and performed, and I live for not only her and RWBY's dynamic, but the fact that she also has compelling interactions with other characters too. One of the moments where I felt the music score was really impressive was with her fight with the Aesops, where the maiden leitmotif came in, albeit very briefly. It was brilliant, and I hope that they continue to use it in the future. I'm not too sure where I see Penny going from here, but I can't imagine that Rooster Teeth is going to let her stick around. She's too strong, and we've yet to be introduced to a villain other than maybe Salem herself or this hound thing that I think can really take Penny head on. I don't know, guys. It just seems to me like there's no real way Penny ends up sticking with Team RWBY. Whether it's because she's killed, or maybe she's overtaken by Watt's program completely, or she just splits off from the rest of the cast after this volume. I don't think she's here to stay, unfortunately. Sidebar. You're not going to have me believe that Emerald had any leverage in this scene. Penny essentially one-shotted both Neo and Cinder, and we've seen nothing from Emerald thus far that demonstrates that she'd be able to do anything fast enough or efficient enough to stop Penny from just blasting her to Kingdom Come. Another sidebar. The details in Penny's design as the volume goes along are masterfully done. I live for it. Jaune, Ren, and Yang are the unexpected people to watch this volume for me. They're the most active besides Penny in the plot and the events of the volume, and I like this groove they've got going here. I've always thought that Jaune and Yang would make good friends and play off of each other well, and this conflict between Yang and Ren has been a gem that I didn't know that I needed. Their action sequences are lit. The environment is utilized well. They all seem to think quickly on their feet, and it just seems to me that this is what it looks like when professional huntsmen are at work, and I'm here for it. I like it a lot. Yang's questioning RWBY makes sense. One, if anyone was going to openly question RWBY's plans, then it would be her older sister. I will say that I don't understand why both teams are acting like this was some big old relationship-ending argument that they had here. Sure, they all seem to disagree to some point, but the only ones that leave this conversation mad are Yang, Ren, and Nora. Suppose you could say that this is the first time we see them disagree on a course of action in a real obvious way since they've been in Atlas. But I think this moment would have landed more for me if we were shown Yang and Blake disagreeing with RWBY's choices last volume a bit more. And it would have been nice to know in show they didn't tell RWBY about their plan to bring Robyn into the loop. This moment is still decent enough otherwise. It highlights the very real fact that RWBY's plans tend to be extremely high risk and that she tends to think them up as she goes and hope that everything will fall into place as long as they stick together. RWBY's an extremely competent commander on the battlefield, but her plans outside of it don't hold up too well under much scrutiny. Everything Yang does pretty much makes sense, even down to her seemingly being more concerned about what Blake thinks about her than RWBY. It tracks, especially when you consider that Blake seemed to be on her side the previous volume, but has now opted not to follow her. Even though it would be nice for Yang to seemingly hold her relationship with her sister in at least a comparable level of esteem than she does with Blake. This moment doesn't really bother me, but I can see how it rankles some people's nerves. I will say that in this little tiff she has with Ren, she shouldn't be as confident as she is with her argument. Yes, the group has accomplished everything that they've set out to do up to this point, but almost none of it has been a direct result of their own actions or ideas. At Haven Academy, Raven fought and defeated Cinder, not any of the group, and the reason that the school wasn't blown the fuck up was because Blake showed up with functionally all of Menagerie, which wasn't something that RWBY's camp planned for. They didn't die to apathy because Maria knew how to help RWBY activate her eyes. They got the relic to Atlas because a military chick eventually decided to just let them go, on top of the fact that she's the one who actually killed the Leviathan. Yang and Blake succeeded in killing Adam, and Team RWBY beat the Aesops. These two things are what Yang should really be able to comfortably defend, and neither of those things disprove a single thing that Ren points out here. RWBY, as in the show and the character, can at times get this, "Oh, the adults and the professionals are actually useless and have done nothing for us, so we have to do everything ourselves" kick. And it's not a good look if you think about it a little bit. Not only is that a tired and boring trope to see over and over again, but the show has literally shown us the exact opposite on screen. It also kind of bothers me that Ren seemingly made out to be the unreasonable one in this scene. I mean, nothing he says is wrong, and nothing in the fact that he said it, and the fact that he says it is not uncalled for. I'm not quite sure the show knows or understands the level. Whatever. I digress again. Good stuff from Yang, looking forward to more. Ren's really good this volume so far. The tension that's been building up in him so far finally snapped, and I'm here for it. It makes perfect sense. So much is going on and all of it is outside of his comfort zone. It totally tracks that he'd want the professionals in their corner, even if he might not necessarily like their plans. And I know this is like the ship of all ships for the show and everything, but I honestly think that separation from between Ren and Nora has done both for their characters a world of good. None of this feels malicious or out of nowhere, except for...
You cheated your way into bacon!
But I'll get back to that. These shots are also examples of how the show uses its strength as a visual medium for super well, and Ren's new semblance evolution looks stunning. Initially, I was kinda concerned that Ren was going to die this volume, and like I said earlier, I still low-key see the possibility. My thought was that maybe Ren would go against the group or hesitate at just the wrong moment or something, and it would end up with him getting fatally wounded. But I also can't imagine the team introducing such an interesting and new facet to his semblance, only to immediately kill him off before exploring what it means for him and the other characters around him in the future.
You cheated your way into bacon!
Dude, that was mean. But not entirely unfair and uncalled for. Oh, we'll talk more about it. We'll talk more about it later. I'm all here for Ren's new empathy abilities, but I personally would have liked at least one more interaction with him and Jaune addressing this before it just popped up. As it is now, we don't actually know that Ren absorbed anything that Jaune said to him right here, nor do we know if anything Yang might have said made a difference. It's totally believable that in the face of the Aesop's callousness over Oscar and Clover, that Ren would react like this, but I personally have liked it better if it was, like, demonstrated clearly that something that his teammates did facilitated this evolution within him. I will say that while all of this was set in place and was pretty compelling and pretty good, if I really want to come back to it and critique it and like pick it apart, it's not all that difficult for me to do so. Ren's clearly made out to be the unreasonable one in the situation, when by all standards and logic, he's 100, almost 100% in the right. And this line from Jaune telling him that he needs to like share his emotions or whatever he said is a bit tone deaf, considering that Ren just literally shared his emotions and was kind of sort of rebuked for it. Like I don't know, like this scene was very good, I'll give it that, but I don't know, like if I wanted to nitpick and pick it apart, it's a bit too easy for me to do so. And the only reason I'm not is because I'm choosing to be cautiously optimistic and hope that RWBY's going to like kind of sort of work on this issue they have where their protagonists' morals and ideas don't actually make sense or fit within the context of the show, but maybe I'll get more into that later at a different time. Speaking of Jaune, I'm also enjoying him so far. I think that he's grown into his role as a supporter and tank super well so far, and it's nice to see him take steps to lower the tension in the group. Jaune's got a lot of heart, and he's always doing his best lately to stay positive and be supportive of everyone around him. He's another character that tends to always have something interesting going on with most of the characters he shares screen time with, and I don't have any problems with him. I like how in this moment Jaune's clearly hurt by Ren's words, and he probably initially finds them unfair, but ultimately he just takes them and moves on. There's a lot going on here if you kind of think about it. Take into account that Jaune's been previously shown to have some pretty self-destructive and martyr-like thoughts about himself, and this reads a bit harsher than Ren just lashing out and Jaune just trying to keep the peace. Because if you think about it, there's no reason that Jaune has to take this from Ren at this point in time. Jaune's been shown to be pretty much capable of keeping up with everyone around him for a while now, and more than one of the main protags literally owe their life to him thus far. And even if Jaune's plans don't always make sense to us as viewers, and yes, there's a conversation to be had about that, but remember, I'm choosing to not nitpick at this point in time. Anyways, It seems to be pretty accepted in universe that he's a good leader, and in the past it's been clear that he knows how to bring out the best in his teammates. So really, Jaune could tell Ren to fuck off here, and it wouldn't be an uncalled for response. Instead, it seems like he internalizes it and believes Ren, which likely does a number on his self-esteem. And if I think about Ren's facial expression here with that context, it's obvious that he regrets saying this, but I wonder if he also realizes that he's attacking someone who isn't going to fight back. And I really like this scene, okay? I really like it. Let me have this. I know that there are problems if you think about it too much, but I'm choosing not to. Just let me have it. I will say, one of those problems, if you think about it, is that I really think the show should have established that Ren and Nora apparently maybe sort of know that Jaune treated his way into Beacon and have both accepted that about him, because I don't think that's actually ever established in the show. I think it's only established that Pietro knows this and was good with it anyway. I really think that if they were gonna have one of them throw this in his face, it should have been established that they both know about it. He may or may not die, but I think that they still have things that they want to do with him, so who knows. Okay, time for Cinder. I'm not gonna lie, guys. Unpopular opinion on the way here. I'm not feeling it for her. I've never been in the camp of people who wanted to have Cinder's backstory shown to us. I wanted our motivations, sure. Maybe a bit on how she came in contact with Salem and what she was doing just before Volume 1's beginning. But this whole deep dive into her past was honestly the part of the volume that dragged the most for me. This was by far my least favorite chapter of the bunch. I feel like Rooster Teeth just lost their opportunity to throw this at us. We should have gotten hits of this in Volume 4 and a deeper dive into it in Volume 5. Putting it here now, for me personally at least, just took a crap ton of time away from significantly more interesting things going on. That all being said, Cinder still works, I guess. The added bit of nuance to her character does in fact support her dynamic with Salem, and she's fun to watch fight sometimes. Sorry if you were super excited about this part of the volume, but it just didn't hit for me. Since we have it though, I have to question what the hell this dude thought was going to happen. If he wasn't going to take her with him for reasons or whatever, why the hell did he give her this sword knowing that she was being abused and that she's angry at the world? Really, dude? Anyways, moving on. I love Oscar so much. Hands down the best vocal performance from the cast consistently. Every single scene that Oscar is in this volume is a treat. This is such a sweet moment. I love the borderline cold way that Oscar is treating Osmond in his head, and both of them admitting that they don't want to unite is gold. The Hound is intense. Every impact here feels like it's on the verge of breaking him, and the frantic and terrifying nature of the way he's just barely trying to fight back is hauntingly effective. This is another part where the music score is just fantastic. Facial expressions and the colors and the framing and scale and just everything about these scenes are brilliant. Though at some point I do wonder when Rooster Teeth are going to decide to give this kid a break. I mean, geez, it's like the MCU and Spider-Man. At what point do you let the child rest? Did you really just introduce him just to break him down every chance you get? I mean, come on. I'm 110% most interested in seeing how things in the Whale are going to go from here on out. And last but certainly not least, Salem herself. Team RWBY's done good with this one, guys. Salem appropriately feels like a world-ending threat in this volume. From Monstro to the River of the Grim, to the Hound, to the way she just smiles at RWBY's broadcasts, to the fact that only Ozma can get a real rise out of her and she just brushes everything else off. Her motherly demeanor with her followers is also noteworthy. It's so manipulative and gaslighty that I don't find it too terribly hard to believe that she was able to convince all of them to follow her willingly. Salem just feels powerful this go-around. The feeling when Pyrrha stepped into that elevator and we were worried that she was taking on something way out of her depths with Cinder at that time. That's the feeling I get from seeing Salem this volume, only multiply it tenfold. Her waves of Grim are so effective at building the tension, and the Hound is the first Grim that's really felt like a notable threat for a while now. These opening scenes from Chapter 7 are stunning, and I think it's pretty clever how we can tell that the people of Atlas clearly aren't used to seeing a Grim invasion and don't know what to do about it. Everything's gone to crap, and I'm just eager to see how it all plays out from here. Anyways, that's about all I have, I guess. The show's got something pretty great going on so far, so here's hoping that they can keep up this momentum. There is one thing that I would like from the show, though, going forward. I would really like for Rooster Teeth to make the main character's morals make sense within the universe. Like, that is the one thing that's consistently just not been hitting for me. Like, at all. Like I said earlier, Ren's pretty much completely right in this scene, but he's framed as being overly emotional and being kind of an asshole, and I don't like that. Great scene, great framing, beautiful colors, great moments, solid voice acting, but if you think about it for too long, you start to think, well, really? You see, everything's just kind of been working out for our protagonists. And in universe, it seems to be treated as something that they're doing for themselves. But from the audience perspective, everything that's going well for them seems to have gone well out of luck. So there's no good reason why Team RWBY herself, or Yang, here for this moment, should have the moral high ground. I don't know. The world they created just doesn't support this view. Let me know what you guys think, maybe, if you agree, disagree, don't care, whatever. And see y'all next time, I guess. That's it.